Hello everyone, we hope you're keeping well. My name is Parvati Venugopal and I am the National Bat Monitoring Program Survey Coordinator at the Bat Conservation Trust.
Hi, my name is Philip Briggs. I'm also part of the NBMP team and my role is Monitoring Manager. And we're here to help you to choose the right bat survey for you if you need help with how and where to begin.
So the National Bat Monitoring Program is the UK's longest running multi-species citizen science program. Our surveys are carefully designed so anyone can take part in monitoring these fascinating but easily overlooked mammals.
Please note you need to be 16 or over to sign up to take part. These surveys are fun and rewarding and allow you to bring your family or friends together or meet new people. So let's begin.
Why is it so important to monitor bats today? Years ago, bats were apparently a much more common sight than today. There are pieces of evidence that numbers have crashed dramatically over the past century or so, but we don't know for sure what the degree of loss has been and over what time period. Bats are, like birds, feed on insects, and in some parts of the world, they pollinate plants and therefore have an important role in keeping a balanced ecosystem. Bats are good indicators of the health of the environment, and they are strongly affected by human activities. In 1996, the Bat Conservation Trust developed a strategy to provide monitoring data that could then be used to assess the conservation needs of the UK's resident and breeding species of bats. The essential long-term objectives are to produce annual population trends for resident bat species, identify any rapid declines early so that appropriate conservation action can take place, identify the reasons behind population changes, and ensure data are used to influence UK environmental policy. So to date, over 3,500 people have taken part in a bat survey of some kind and submitted data. Not bad for these scary creatures, isn't it? At present, data are collected to produce population trends for 11 of the 17 species known to breed in the UK. Methods continue to evolve as knowledge improves and technology changes. So moving on to NBMP surveys, everyone can take part, but the different surveys require different skill levels. So this table provides you a brief summary of the different surveys NBMP offer, and we will go through each survey in more detail later in the presentation. As you can see, the Sunset survey, which everyone can take part, including absolute beginners. You don't need any bat ID skills or you don't need any equipments to take part in this survey. Whereas in Roost Count, anyone who knows of a roost, they can count bats. For Field and Waterway Survey, you need some bat detector experience, and for Hibernation Survey, you can either accompany a licensed surveyor because licensed surveyors can only lead the Hibernation Survey. So one important health and safety advice is that you should not do your survey on your own. So please bring a friend or family member for safety. They do not need to be a bat expert, or you can ask your local bat group for any helpers. So please remember, survey buddies are important, and please don't survey alone.
Summer maternity roost counts are usually fairly simple to do, and anyone can take part. On 2 evenings in the summer, in June for most species, you stand or sit outside the roost from sunset and count the bats out as they emerge. If you do not know of a roost to count yourself, get in touch with your bat group and you may be able to help to monitor locally known roosts. You do not need a bat detector, but it can help. You can count any species, but as the focus is mainly on roosts in buildings, there are 7 species that we have enough data for to enable statistically robust species population trends to be produced. Try to position yourself where you can see the bats silhouetted against the sky or a pale background as they emerge.
Field Survey. Field survey is one of the options if you want to use your bat detecting skills. The multi-species field survey takes place in July. You use a heterodyne bat detector to monitor activity of noctules, serotines, common pipistrelles, and soprano pipistrelles. Field survey is ideally done on 2 evenings in July, but if only one night is carried out, it still gives us useful information, especially on sites that have been surveyed before. However, 2 surveys per year is better for the statistical analysis. So we tried to match new volunteers with previously surveyed sites as this strengthens our data. If you are allocated a previously surveyed site, then you will receive the route map produced by the previous volunteer and try to follow the route as closely as you can. If it is a new site, there are instructions for mapping out a route from scratch. Volunteers survey a 1 kilometer square with 12 walking sections with the detector tuned to 25 kilohertz, listening for noctules and serotines only. Numbers of bats passes are counted in order to record activity levels. At 12 stopping points, at least 150 meter apart, surveyors stop and tune to 50 kilohertz to record pipistrelle activity for 2 minutes. The serotine range is largely confined to the southern half of Great Britain, that is up to North Wales. So through much of northern England and all of Scotland, only pipistrelles and noctules are monitored. I'm going to play a soprano pipistrelle video. This illustrates soprano pipistrelle activity that you might be recording at some of your stopping points. So listen and enjoy. So one important point to remember here is that if you record few or no bats along your route, this is still important information. So please still submit your results.
The Waterway Survey takes place in August. This survey is simpler than the field survey, so is good for people who are relatively new to bat detecting. Volunteers are assigned a 1 kilometre stretch of water along a river or a canal. If you don't live close to a repeat site, which will have a route mapped by a previous volunteer, then you can take on a new site. For new sites, you need to map out a survey route yourself, and there are instructions on how to do this. Surveyors make 10 stops along the river and record for 4 minutes with the detector tuned to 35 kilohertz, noting down the number of de Benton's bat passes. On your bat detector, you listen out for the rapid dry clicks, which could be de Benton's bat, though could also be another Myotis species. So you also need to look for the visual clue of a bat skimming low over the water in order to be reasonably sure that it's de Benton's bat. In this video we're about to see, you'll hear the rapid dry clicks you get when you pick up a Myotis bat on your heterodyne bat detector. Seeing the bat skimming low over the water confirms that it is likely to be de Benton's bat. If you hear something that sounds like a Myotis bat, but don't see a bat skimming over the water, then record this as unsure de Benton's bat. You can use a torch to help you see the bat, but only use the torch briefly. Don't keep it shining across the water. So when you hear a possible de Benton's bat approaching, shine the torch low over the water, just long enough to see whether the bat is displaying the flight behaviour of a de Benton's bat. In this video, I will show you how to select a site near you to survey for the Field Survey or Waterway Survey as part of the National Bat Monitoring Programme. You can find direct links to these surveys below this video. Take a look at these pages to read more about each survey and how to take part. For this video, we will go straight to the View and Select Survey Sites button, starting with the Field Survey. The first thing to do is type your postcode into the search box. I will type the postcode of the Bat Conservation Trust office as an example. So you can see a few sites are coming up in this area. I will zoom out a bit to see a wider range of sites. So all the sites are randomly selected 1 kilometre squares. This is so that we get an unbiased sample of monitoring locations that give us a good representation of habitats across the UK. Some will be good sites for bats, some not so good, but all are important for monitoring how bats are faring over time. Clicking on each square gives us a bit of information about each one. You'll see that the red squares are sites that have been surveyed before or repeat sites. The orange squares have not previously been surveyed, and the grey squares are currently taken by a volunteer, so are not available to select. Some of the squares have the survey route shown. So this is where the route has been digitised online by the volunteer. This is an extra bit of helpful information as it gives you a preview of the route you will need to walk if you take on this survey site. For the repeat sites, it's particularly useful if you can take on a site that hasn't been surveyed for many years. This is because getting updated bat counts from these sites makes a really important contribution to our species population trends. If you can start by looking at the site which was last surveyed longest ago and is within reasonable travelling distance from you, this would be really helpful. So looking at the red squares, which are repeat sites, and clicking on them, you can see the last survey year. So this one was 2016, this one was 2020, this one was 2010, so that was longer ago than the last two. So you'll start by looking at this one. The first thing to do is assess how easy the site is to travel to and from, bearing in mind that you might be finishing a couple of hours or more after sunset in July for this survey. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how you will get back home afterwards. If it seems okay from that point of view, zoom in a bit closer just to see what the accessibility is like for getting around the site. And of course, in more rural and particularly upland areas, there might be very different safety and accessibility considerations. At the moment, this is very much an initial assessment, and once you've taken on this site as a potential site that you could do, you will do a daytime recce where you visit the site during the day and do a walk around to see if you can follow the route that's previously been mapped out and check that it's still a safe site to walk around at night. But if the first site you look at doesn't look suitable for you, then look at others. And although I mentioned that we are keen to get the older sites resurveyed, the most important thing is that the site is safe and accessible for you. And if none of the red squares is suitable for you, then look at the orange squares. So these are sites that haven't been surveyed before. One or two of them do actually have a route mapped out, but for most of them you will need to map out the route from scratch, but instructions are provided to help you do this. And once you've decided which site you would like to survey, simply click on it and click Survey this site. And this takes you to the login screen. If you haven't yet created an NBMP account, click Create an Account and fill in your details. If you've already got an account, type in your login details and click here to log in. And it'll take you to your Field Survey Sites page, and you'll see the site you've just selected is added to your page. You can click Field Survey Resources, and this will take you to the page where you can download the Field Survey forms and instructions.
You can click on the site details page, and here you can download a PDF of the route map to take into the field. You can add your counts for 2022 once you've done your survey. So you've got everything you need to do your survey. For the Waterway Survey, it's pretty simple. Look at this page to find out what the survey involves. Click here to select a site. Again, type in your postcode. And because the Waterway Survey, this isn't about doing surveys where you're walking around 1 kilometre squares. The sites are designated by red and orange dots along waterways, and the survey routes are shown as series of 10 stopping points along the waterways. And again, if you just click on the red dots, you will see the last time the site was surveyed. If you've got different options, then try and go for the site that hasn't been surveyed for the longest if possible. But any site you can survey is really useful. So go to these pages, pick a site near you, get surveying, and you'll be making a really valuable contribution to UK bat monitoring.
The NBMP Hibernation Survey involves collecting data from licensed bat workers who survey hibernacula. Many of these sites have been monitored since before the NBMP began, and we have received historic data going back to the 1970s, or even earlier for at least one site. These surveys would mainly take place even without the NBMP, but using NBMP survey forms helps standardise the data collection. All species found are recorded, and data are used from December to March in NBMP trend analysis. Every UK species has been recorded on hibernation surveys included in the NBMP. 6 of the more commonly recorded species have sufficient data to enable the production of species population trends.
As I mentioned earlier, the Sunset Survey is an ideal survey for beginners. But more experienced surveyors also take part, as it is a good way of locating roosts in your local area. No bat detector is needed, but if you have one, then obviously do use it. So you can now take part in any time of the year from April to October when the weather is mild or warm at dusk. Even winter evenings can sometimes be mild and may well give you some bat sightings. There are 2 parts to the survey, sunset and sunrise. You can do one or the other or both. The sunrise survey is more challenging as it involves getting up an hour before sunrise, but it's worth it, isn't it? Simply look for bats and other nocturnal wildlife in your garden from your balcony or window or your local green space. So as I said, if doing the sunrise survey when you may be lucky enough to spot bats swarming around a structure, this means you have located a bat roost, as bats tend to swarm around the roost entrance before going back in. So let's have a look at a bat dawn swarming video here. Great. Let's have a look at last year's Sunset Survey results. Sunset Survey volunteers recorded 2,273 bat records, which include 15 species of bats and more than 90 non-bat species. A total of 353 volunteers across the UK participated. You can see last year's Sunset Survey coverage from the map on the screen. Last year, there was an increase in the number of sunset and sunrise surveys taking place across the UK. A variety of other species were also recorded, including other mammals such as badgers and hedgehogs, and also stag beetles and owls.
The latest species population trends from the National Bat Monitoring Programme can be found in the NBMP annual report on the BCT website. A few species, including common pipistrelle, are showing statistically significant increases from NBMP surveys. Other species, such as de Benton's bat, are not showing signs of recovery but appear to have stable populations. Some species do not easily lend themselves to the current NBMP survey techniques, particularly some of the habitat specialists that may be especially vulnerable. These include several of the woodland specialists that are difficult to detect and identify from their calls. The NBMP is exploring techniques for collecting data that can be used to include these species in the annual population trends. It should be remembered that recent population increases need to be put in the context of evidence of much more dramatic declines over the last 100 years. We need more data in order to produce more robust trends for all species. We'd also like to be able to look at how bats are faring at the regional level, as well as the country and GB level. At the moment, we're able to produce country level trends for most species, but not all. You can help by taking part in surveys in your local area.
National Nathusius Pipistrelle project was instigated by Daniel Hargreaves in partnership with BCT and is carried out by bat groups who have members on the project license or who have their own license. It uses hub trapping survey techniques to collect information and enhance our understanding of the UK status of this widespread yet enigmatic species. Trapping surveys provide information on confirming species presence, sex, age, and reproductive status, location of roost, and migratory movements. This map shows the distribution of Nathusius pipistrelle records from the project to date. BCT are keen to hear from bat groups interested in getting involved in parts of the country that have not yet been covered. Ringing recovery records have shed new light on movements between England and mainland Europe. This includes Nathusius pipistrelles originally ringed in Latvia and Lithuania being recaptured during NNPP trapping surveys. The record distance is at least 2,000 kilometers for a bat ringed in London and rediscovered in Russia. Nathusius pipistrelles ringed in England have been recovered as grounded bats in Holland, Belgium, and Poland, presumably en route to their Eastern European breeding grounds.
Currently, BCT is developing and rolling out a new survey, the British Bat Survey, or BBats for short. This uses low-cost acoustic sensors called audiomoths to carry out static monitoring of bats. This slide shows the pathway being developed and piloted for participation in this project. It utilises the latest developments in acoustic sensor design, automated call recognition, and interactive volunteer feedback. So the volunteer puts an audio moth out in the field, and this will record bat calls over several nights. The volunteer then uploads the audio moth recordings to a server. The calls are then automatically detected and identified using algorithms, and the results are then reported back to the volunteer. BBats will collect data on a wide range of species, complementing existing NBMP surveys by adding species population monitoring for additional species that we know can be identified from their calls with relatively high accuracy. These include Leisler's bat, Nathusius pipistrelle, and Barbastelle. It will also provide trends for currently monitored species that can be compared against trends from the long-running NBMP survey methods. Participation should be much more inclusive since bat identification skills are not needed to collect the data. Also, we should be able to cover more remote areas that are difficult to access at night, since the audio moths are installed during the day and then left recording for a number of nights. Volunteers will be asked to collect data from randomly generated locations to avoid bias in the resulting species population trends. However, a related survey called Night Watch allows volunteers to deploy audio moths in locations of their own choice. This is more of an engagement survey that will also collect useful species distribution data.